Good evening, everyone. We welcome back again to our webinar series on statistics. We are little sorry for last week we couldn't accommodate the session, but from this week we will continue the sessions. And with that intro, sir, please take over, sir.
Yeah, good evening, everyone. So today's class was basically overview for all of you to understand how to read a meta-analysis. Now, there are several reasons why a meta-analysis is published on a particular topic, and they constitute one of the highest levels of evidence that we have, especially a systematic review or meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials. And they have become staple now, and they were popularized from the 70s onwards. I mean, I think it was psychiatry and gastroenterology which started presenting meta-analysis data, and slowly in oncology it picked up. So over the last 15 years or so, we have a lot of meta-analysis published in different topics, trying to quantify the effect of a particular intervention or a particular investigation. So we will start with a small PPT. Actually, the PPT was a large PPT, but I've tried to make it practical and small. So I've sort of reduced the number of slides. But let me start by getting the PPT going. So are you able to see the PowerPoint, Bhargav?
Yes, sir, we are able to see, sir.
So, what is a meta-analysis basically? We are aware that there are several types of published literature that is available. You have prospective studies, you have retrospective studies, you have case series, and most of the studies are retrospective with a few trials coming in. So, in many of these studies, the studies could be underpowered, or the results could have a wide confidence interval, or the sample size might be too small to make a meaningful assessment of what the effect on your population would be or what the clinical effect would be. So, a meta analysis tries to overcome all of this by giving a single overall measure of treatment effect. In oncology, it's basically treatment, and it gives a single overall measure of treatment effect. And it is a standardized approach to studying literature also. There is a way to conduct a meta analysis starting from the way you acquire the papers and individual data to the use of statistical tests, the pictorial representation or the visual representation of your data, how you would accommodate heterogeneity, how do you test for interaction, and what kind of statistics model that you would use. So there is a standardized approach to studying. It is a standardized approach to studying existing literature. So what we basically do in a meta-analysis is that we take data from the existing literature and it is pooled, and you get a quantitative analysis. There is also a possibility of getting qualitative analysis done from a meta-analysis, but mostly it is a quantitative analysis that is made. And usually meta-analysis are combined with a systematic review. A meta-analysis is just an extension of a systematic review. And the advantage that we have is that we combine several studies, like I mentioned, which may be underpowered or may have a wide confidence interval or might not have a statistically significant result. And we can pool all of this data and get a meaningful result. Now, there are some assumptions that you should make before conducting a meta-analysis or reading a meta-analysis. Basically, a meta-analysis should have an effect that is clearly defined. That is, there is a dependent variable and then there is an independent variable. So, for example, in the paper that I sent you, looking at the effects of chemotherapy on nasopharynx, you have the chemotherapy as one of the variables and the study endpoints, that is overall survival and progression-free survival, as another variable. So, the effect is clearly defined, and all the studies included in the meta-analysis should study that effect. You cannot take a study that has not mentioned one of the endpoints, for example, overall survival, and then try and include it in your meta-analysis, because that analysis is meaningless. So first, the effect should be clearly defined. Second, all the studies that study the effect, all the studies that are included in the meta-analysis should study the effect. The second important thing is the person who has conducted the meta-analysis or the paper that you're reading, the authors must have made an attempt to include all the studies that have been conducted in that field or for that research question. And for that, there is a way of looking at literature, both published and unpublished, that is from electronic databases and non-electronic databases or clinical trial registries. So the third important thing is that the author should have made a systematic attempt to include all of the studies that have looked at the effect and the variable and the effect. The studies included in the meta-analysis have to be methodologically sound. They should have appropriate statistical tests. They should have appropriate sample size, and they should have been no problems with the statistics method used in those studies. And the ideal thing is the effect sizes in the study should be comparable. When I mean effect sizes, the results should be comparable. So more comparable effect sizes in the individual studies, there is more homogeneity in the meta-analysis, and the results are probably more meaningful. If the studies have a wide range of effects, then there could be a heterogeneity in the data that we have, and there are tests to check for the heterogeneity. The heterogeneity can be because of the patient factors, can be because of tumor factors. So the study effects should be comparable to have a meaningful meta-analysis. Now, there is something called the PRISMA flow diagram. So PRISMA is the preferred reporting items for systematic reviews and meta-analysis. And this is the pathway that one takes to study or to include the different studies into their meta-analysis. So there are four blocks. One is the identification block, one is the screening block, eligibility block, and finally the studies which have been included in the meta-analysis. So to identify the studies, there should be database searching, and there should be additional records identified for the study. Database searching is Medline or PubMed or one of the electronic databases that are available. And additional records are usually from clinical trial registries, trials which have not been published so far. So they are the additional sources. And then during usually two people, independent people, do the sorting out of the studies. And once they identify the studies are all compiled together in a master chart, and the abstracts are reviewed, and the duplicated abstracts from the search methodology is removed. That is part of the screening process. So you have n number of records that were screened and n number of records that were excluded because of duplication. And then once you've gone beyond your screening phase of the abstracts, then you collect the full text articles and look for eligibility, meaning you must have a sound inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria for the studies, and you have to make sure that these studies have been included, their full texts are available to you. But you also have to mention the number of articles that were excluded, and you have to mention the reasons why they were excluded. And finally, once the articles have crossed the eligibility block, they get included in the qualitative analysis, and finally in the meta-analysis, which is the quantitative analysis. So this PRISMA reporting or PRISMA search strategy is a foundation for all the meta-analysis that are being published today. So almost all of the authors follow this. The paper that I shared with you does not explicitly mention that they have followed the PRISMA flow diagram, but their methodology is almost the same. But look for the PRISMA diagram in all the meta-analysis that you're reading. Now, there are some concepts in meta-analysis that we need to learn and remember. So a meta-analysis can be done with just two or more studies. And as I mentioned, you get a single numerical value for the overall effect. for that group of studies that you have included in your meta-analysis. The effect size is there is no dimension for the effect, so the effect should indicate the direction and the magnitude. So usually the effect size we get in the forest plot by means of a point estimate and summary estimate. So the effect size is the other point that you have to remember. Odds ratio and relative risk, I think most of you know that odds ratio is the probability of an event occurring compared to an event not occurring in a particular group. And relative risk is the risk amongst exposed divided by the risk amongst non-exposed. Now, the fixed effects model and random effects model are two types of statistical models used in meta-analysis. I will tell you about that a little bit later. But in this slide, I just want you to remember that the fixed effect model determines the best population treatment effect. So it is a single numerical value, whereas a random effects model studies a distribution of treatment amongst a range of values. The forest plot is what is used to visually represent the meta-analysis data, and the confidence intervals are usually the 95% confidence intervals is what we give. The narrower the confidence interval, the more weight of that study or more the effects are more important. So we should remember that always have studies which have narrower confidence intervals. So we don't use that much of continuous data, or we don't read meta-analysis with that many continuous data literature published. So we usually study dichotomous data, that is presence or absence of risk factors or the risk of death. So it's either the odds ratio or the relative risk that we usually study. And remember that it is dichotomous data, that is yes or no for the types of studies that we use in oncology. Now, what are the components of a meta-analysis or a forest plot? So, somebody said something. Yeah. So, what are the they should read as components of a forest plot? So, forest plot is integral to meta-analysis because this is the best way for you to understand the results of the analysis, and it's the visual representation of the analysis. So, in a forest plot picture, usually what you have is you have a pictorial representation with a horizontal line, vertical line, a few squares with horizontal lines attached, and a diamond which is usually present. And then you have the numbers, the author, the year of publication, and some numbers that you need to remember here. So let me start with the diagram first, and then let me jump on to the relevant points in the text. So there is something called the point estimate. So point estimates are these squares that you see. So point estimate is the effect size of a particular paper. So the point estimate is usually measured by a square, and the horizontal lines on either side of that is the confidence interval. Now, why are the different squares with different sizes? So the bigger the square, the more weight it has on the meta-analysis. So if you see here, the first study has a weight of 73.9%. So the bigger the squares, they have more weight, and the shorter the confidence interval. So bigger squares with shorter horizontal lines contribute more to the meta-analysis, and the results of these studies are more meaningful for the meta-analysis. So if you have a smaller square with a large horizontal line on either side, it means that the confidence interval for the effects in that individual study was a lot, and the effects were also not as compared, or they did not carry that much weight in the meta-analysis. Now, I mentioned to you that a meta-analysis is a summary of all the individual studies that have been published in literature. So the summary estimate is this diamond here. Now, if you notice that this diamond does not have the horizontal lines on either side, that is because the horizontal dimension of this diamond is what the 95% confidence interval is. So the shorter the diamond, the narrower the confidence interval, the larger the diamond, the larger the confidence interval. Now, what is this vertical line and this horizontal line? So this horizontal line estimates either the odds ratio, the relative risk, or the dichotomous data that we have. And this vertical line is a line of no effect, meaning if the effect of a study was to fall on this line, it means that there was no difference between the control arm and the experimental arm. If these boxes lie on one side, if they lie on the left side, it prefers the experimental arm. In this case, it was a study looking at carbomer versus placebo for some orthopedic problem. So in this study, if you look at the position of the boxes, they all favored the experimental arm. Now, it is not sufficient that we look at the position of the boxes and the summary effect. So this is summary effect for two endpoints. One was day 21 or 28, and the other was day 56. So the summary effect says that both on day 21 or 28 or on day 56, the experimental arm is favored over the control arm. So that is understood from this picture because you're to the left of the line of no effect. But what is also important is that along a vertical plane, all of these boxes and the horizontal lines, which are the confidence intervals, should to some degree overlap each other. So if they overlap each other, it means that there is homogeneity in the effects of the homogeneity in the effects and in the effect and the confidence interval of individual studies. So it is only a broad pictorial understanding whether there is homogeneity or heterogeneity. Here we see that they really don't overlap each other. The boxes and the horizontal lines don't really overlap each other. So this is one of the problems with doing a meta-analysis is that the studies can have heterogeneity, and there are different ways to study for that heterogeneity. And the two common ways are the Cochrane-Q, otherwise called the chi-squared test, or the I-squared statistic given by Higgins. So that is what you see here. What you see here is the test for heterogeneity and the test for overall effect. So the test for overall effect is your p-value, which says whether this was a statistically meaningful result in the meta-analysis. So here it is 0.22, it is not significant. Here it is 0.08, it is significant. But I will come back to what the chi-squared values, p-value, and what the I-squared value means in the subsequent slides. So what are the tests for heterogeneity? So I told you first that you look at the Prisma flow diagram for adequate inclusion of studies into the meta-analysis. Then you look at the point estimate, you look at the summary estimate, you look at the position of the position and the size of the squares. You look at the position of the diamond, you see if the diamond is short or wide, and you see whether the diamond is favoring the experimental arm or the diamond is favoring the control arm on either side of the line of no effect. The other thing that you have to look at is the test for heterogeneity. So as I mentioned, if there's a lot of heterogeneity, then the results of the meta-analysis become less meaningful, or the summary effect becomes less meaningful, and you have to change the type of statistical modeling you use. I told you there are two types of models. One's a fixed effects model, and the other is a random effects model. I will tell you the relationship of the fixed effects and the random effects model in the subsequent slides. So the first test, as I mentioned, is the Cochrane-Q or the chi-square test. And what it does is it assesses whether the observed differences in results are compatible with chance alone. So if you have a low p-value, there is a significant p-value, it provides the evidence of heterogeneity of the intervention effects. That is, the variation effects is estimates beyond chance. So a low p-value indicates there is heterogeneity, high p-value indicates there is no, or an insignificant p-value indicates that there is no heterogeneity in the studies. But the problem is there are arguments that there's always methodological diversity available in a meta-analysis because not all studies are the same. So statistical heterogeneity is inevitable. That is what we accept now. And a more meaningful way of quantifying this heterogeneity is by the Higgins I-squared statistic. And this was given by Higgins, and there are different authors. So this I-squared, as I mentioned to you in the previous slide, you have one I-squared value of 47, and you have the other I-squared value of 17. So one of the ways, there are many authors who have given different cutoffs for what is significant heterogeneity and what is insignificant heterogeneity. So the values can be from 0 to 100. A rough idea is that if it is less than 50%, the studies are considered homogeneous. Okay, this is what the CEBM Oxford mentions on their website. If it is more than 50%, the heterogeneity is high. And so the importance of this homogeneous and heterogeneous understanding is that if the studies are considered homogeneous, you used a fixed effect model. So I told you the fixed effect model gives you a single value. It is what is the best effect of the best estimate of the population in the population. And a random effects model gives you the average treatment effect. So if there is high heterogeneity, if your I-square is greater than 50%, we use a random effects model. If it is less than 50%, we can use a fixed effects model. So this is the other important reason why we look at heterogeneity before looking at the type of model that they have used. So, so what is significant? I mean, if the previous slide was to show you where to use a fixed effects model, where to use a random effects model, or where it would be appropriate. But on this slide, what you're looking at is whether it is significant or not. So if it is between 0 and 40, might not be important. 30, they're overlapping numbers. So 30 to 60, moderate heterogeneity. So we're looking at that. If it is 50 to 90, substantial heterogeneity. If it's 75 to 100, it is considerable heterogeneity. So always look at the I-squared to understand how heterogeneous the study is. So this is an example of a study which has got low heterogeneity. So I mentioned that the p-value is not significant and the I-squared statistic was 0. And you can see I mentioned to you that almost all of the point estimates with their confidence intervals lie along a vertical line. They are not displaced on either side, or not. They are not far away if they're on the same side as well. So you can see here that these studies are, this is a forest plot with little heterogeneity. And you can see, as I mentioned to you, the size of the effect, the size of the point estimate it shows you is represented to you in the form of a square. So the bigger the square, the bigger the weight of that studies, or the bigger the contribution of that effect into your meta-analysis. So you can see that this is 22.83, which is higher than the two smaller boxes that have been mentioned here. And this is the weighted mean difference. So we will not go into that now. And like I mentioned to you, the test of heterogeneity is 0.59. So there is no heterogeneity or very limited heterogeneity, and the I-squared statistic is 0. And the p-value is significant because that was the test of interaction of our overall effect. So look at another paper where there is significant heterogeneity. So visually, it's quite easy to make out. As I mentioned to you, there is no real vertical axis for all the individual point estimates with your confidence intervals. They're all over the place. And if you look at the I-squared statistics, it is 46.8%. So there is some heterogeneity. It is not very significant heterogeneity. There is some heterogeneity. The p-value, again, sometimes for this test alone, the p-value is raised to 0.1 rather than being 0.05. So some people consider 0.1 to be significant for the Cochrane Q or for the chi-squared test of heterogeneity. So here, if you take 0.1 as a cutoff, then this is significant, meaning that there is, I wouldn't consider 1, I would still say 0.5, but some authors consider 0.1. But here the I-squared statistic is 46.8%, suggesting that there is some heterogeneity. But for the overall effect, it was significant, and the diamond is a short diamond, and it lies on the side of the effect. So these are the things that I wanted to, get into your mind before looking at a meta-analysis. Now, a lot of the meta-analysis that is published in data that is published in a paper is usually available in the appendix of the article. That is, it's not available with the article that you download from the journal website. And not all of the effects are visually depicted in the paper, and only selected forest plots and selected data is shown to you. So the paper that I had decided to share with you today, I'll just pull up the paper now. Any questions so far? I just want to make sure that you understood the different points of the meta-analysis. Let me share the paper. Can you see the paper now?
Yes, sir.
So this is a paper that was published in 2015, and this is published in Lancet Oncology. So I'll give you a bit of background on this paper. What they had tried to do is, for a long time, there was only one randomized controlled trial which looked at the effects of concomitant chemotherapy and radiation in the treatment of nasopharyngeal carcinoma. Now, nasopharyngeal carcinoma usually presents advanced with metastasis. There are two variants of nasopharyngeal carcinoma. One is the endemic variant and the other is a non-endemic. The endemic is the Epstein-Barr virus dependent tumor. The non-endemic is keratinized tumor, which is related to smoking habits. So for a very long time, the treatment was only radiation. Then the intergroup trial came out, and it was by Al-Sarraf. The intergroup trial came out. They had looked at the addition of chemotherapy to radiation, and they found a significant effect in the interim analysis, and they had to stop the trial, in fact. But there was a lot of confusion whether this treatment works both, because in America, most of them were non-endemic groups, so there was a lot of confusion whether it works for the endemic and non-endemic, and there was a lot of confusion whether chemotherapy actually helped in the overall survival and progression-free survival of nasopharyngeal carcinoma. So there was a first MAC-MPC analysis published, and this is the second meta-analysis that they have published, adding on to the cases of the first meta-analysis. So this has more studies, and this has obviously more patients. And as I mentioned to you, all of the studies should study the same effect. All of the studies included in the meta-analysis should study the same effect. That is, there should be a dependent variable and an independent variable, and the methodology of the individual study should be sound. So this meta-analysis answered the question, or tried to find out the answer for the question whether chemotherapy and timing of chemotherapy, because the first meta-analysis just looked at addition of chemotherapy, whether it helped in nasopharyngeal carcinoma, the first meta-analysis published by this group. But they did not look at the timing of the chemotherapy, whether if you give chemotherapy as induction, whether you give chemotherapy as concomitant, whether you give chemotherapy as adjuvant, or if you give chemotherapy as concomitant followed by adjuvant. The timing of the chemotherapy and its effect on survival was not studied in the previous meta-analysis. So they tried to include other studies which were published after the first meta-analysis, and they tried to see if they had any significant outcomes. So this meta-analysis, they didn't explicitly mention that they follow the PRISMA guidelines, but they have more or less followed the same. So it was searched in PubMed, Web of Science, Cochrane, the trials registrar, and the clinicaltrials.gov website, and also meeting proceedings, because the meeting proceedings sometimes may not be published, and clinicaltrials.gov might have data for unpublished trials also. So they have mentioned explicitly what their endpoint was. Their primary endpoint of interest was overall survival, and they used the fixed effects model because there was not much significant heterogeneity in their study. So you have to explicitly mention what model you use. I told you that a fixed effects model will give you the best estimate of the population effect, whereas the random effects model is more of a distribution. So the primary endpoint was overall survival. All of the data was analyzed in a fixed effects model, and the data was also analyzed on an intention to treat basis. So in intention to treat analysis, you include all patients as part of the analysis, whether they completed the treatment or not, or whether they dropped out of the trial protocol. So that is a common way to account for people who leave the trial, and many of the trials are with an intention to treat basis. So if you look at their abstract states that they had 19 trials with 4,806 patients. Now, if you read into the study a little bit, we'll come to that as I scroll the paper. They had a median follow-up of 7.7 years. Now, the way that they've calculated the follow-up is through a reverse Kaplan-Meier estimate. So usually the way that we calculate follow-up of a patient, the way we usually represent follow-up of a patient is the median follow-up. Everybody knows that. But the problem with the median follow-up is that you look at patients who have started the study, and then you look at patients at the end of the study who have either living or have had experienced the event in question. It doesn't look at patients but the problem is it doesn't separate who had an earlier event, who had a later event. So what a reverse Kaplan-Meier estimate will do is it will reverse the censored data and the event data. So this is one of the newer ways of finding the median follow-up, especially in the meta-analysis. So don't be surprised to see the word reverse Kaplan-Meier estimate. It is slightly better than the normal percentage estimate that we use for calculating calculating follow-up. Now, so their first point was very clear. They found that if you add chemotherapy to radiotherapy, whatever it is, it can be in any setting. Overall, when they looked at all of the 19 trials in the meta-analysis, they found out that there was significant improvement in the overall survival, and the hazard ratio was 0.79, which is less than 1. So 1 is a line of no effect between the experimental arm, which is probably radiation alone, versus the experimental arm is the chemotherapy plus radiation arm, whereas the control arm is the radiation arm alone. And you can see that the confidence interval is also quite narrow. It's 0.73 to 0.86, and it was significant. And there was an absolute benefit at 5 years of 6.3%. Now, this line here is not visually represented in the paper. So don't look for this in the figures in the forest plots and the event charts that we're going to look at. So, but the more important thing in this paper was they wanted to study the interaction between the treatment effect and the timing. That was what they were trying to look at. So they found out that if you time the chemotherapy in a way that you give chemotherapy plus adjuvant, or you give chemotherapy without adjuvant, there is benefit for the patient in overall survival. That is what they found out. But they didn't find it for patients who received adjuvant chemotherapy alone or patients who received induction chemotherapy. So the second question that they wanted to answer was whether the timing of chemotherapy makes a difference, and they found out that patients who had either concomitant chemoradiation or concomitant chemoradiation with adjuvant, they had better overall survival compared to patients who had induction or adjuvant. And this is made out from the hazard. So the less the hazard ratio, it is better. So the concomitant plus adjuvant is only 0.65%. Concomitant without adjuvant was 0.80%, whereas adjuvant alone was 0.87, so it was closer to the line of no difference. Our induction was 0.96, again, it's very close to the line of no significance. And the benefit was consistent for all the endpoints that were analyzed, which included, these were part of the secondary analysis, I'm presuming, that included progression-free survival, again, a HR of 0.75, local regional control 0.73, distant control 0.67, and mortality related to nasopharyngeal carcinoma, so 0.76. Unfortunately, this meta-analysis did not separate endemic patients, or I mean, it wasn't part of their main discussion or main intention for doing this meta-analysis. So that question was answered in other papers subsequently. So let us look at the charts first, and then let us go to the text after that. And as I mentioned, a lot of the data in this paper, the text has more information than the forest plot and the charts. And the aim of this paper, me discussing this paper, is not for you to get overwhelmed with the data published in written text, but for you to look at how forest plot is represented and how we look at the pictorial representation. So what they did was, I said they have 19 studies altogether. So they grouped the studies into induction group, adjuvant group, the concomitant group, and the concomitant plus adjuvant group. That was the 4 timings of the chemotherapy that we know. And they have put the papers in chronological order. That is the oldest paper first and the most recent paper as the last paper. Now we have the experimental group, that is the chemotherapy group, and then we have the control group. So this experimental group is induction, this experimental group is adjuvant, this experimental group is concomitant, and this experimental group is concomitant plus adjuvant. And the control, these patients did not receive any form of chemotherapy. So the right number on the side of the slash is the total number of patients entered in that group, and the left number that you see in all of this is the number of patients who have experienced the event, that is death here. So you look at the pictorial representation here. As I mentioned to you, the boxes are the point estimates, and the bigger the box, the bigger or more significant its effect on the meta-analysis is going to be. And you can see some of them have very wide confidence intervals, and some of them have short confidence intervals. So a short confidence interval with a bigger box is more weight to adds more weight to the meta-analysis than this NPC study, for example. And I mentioned to you that the diamond is the summary estimate, and the summary estimate's hazard ratio is given on the side of each. So you can see that for the different groups of treatment, that is induction, adjuvant, concomitant, and concomitant plus adjuvant, we have individual hazard ratios that are plotted. But if you want to study the overall effect of the different types of chemotherapy, you look at the diamond at the end of the different study. That is the total number of patients. Now, this dotted line represents the line where the diamond lies, and this is in the side where chemotherapy is better. So this is a line of no difference. So here the chemotherapy arm was better. So irrespective of the type of chemotherapy that was given, the hazard ratio, the pooled hazard ratio was 0.79, so which was definitely better. And you can see the test for heterogeneity here was not too bad. The I-squared Higgins statistic is only 30%. So this was not too heterogeneous, so hence a fixed FX model was used. And you can see the test for interaction is also significant. So from this forest plot, what we can make out is that irrespective of the type of chemotherapy that you give, additional chemotherapy to treatment in a nasopharyngeal carcinoma has a pooled estimate or a summary estimate hazard ratio of 0.79 with a very narrow confidence interval favoring the chemotherapy arm. The study had limited heterogeneity, and it was a statistically significant cumulative effect that we had obtained. So this is for overall survival. This is a forest plot for overall survival, and that was your primary endpoint. Now, this is the forest plot for the progression-free survival. Again, the same um, uh, way that they have, put the papers out. It's induction, adjuvant, concomitant plus adjuvant. Again, chronologically ordered. So here you have the total number of patients on the right side, and then you have the patients who experience the event. On the left side here, it is progression. And this is the experimental arm. This is the control arm with radiation alone. And here again, you see there are different sizes of boxes, meaning some were more weighted than the others. Some had shorter confidence intervals, meaning that there were more significant studies for the meta-analysis. Some of them had large confidence intervals and smaller point estimates. So these studies probably were not significant. But more or less, almost all the studies they fall with overlap vertically. So again, this also shows that there is not much heterogeneity. You will notice that here as well, most of the black dots, uh, except for the concomitant plus adjuvant, which dramatically favors the chemotherapy arm, most of the others lie along a similar vertical axis, meaning that the heterogeneity is not that much. But you can make out the difference here for the overall survival. The I-squared Higgins statistic was 30%, meaning that there was some heterogeneity but not significant. Whereas here you can see that they overlap more, and our I-squared statistic was only 12%, meaning that this was quite homogeneous. Now, here again in the progression-free survival, you have the individual diamonds for the individual timings of chemotherapy. So some diamonds are bigger, meaning that their confidence intervals are wider. Some diamonds are shorter, meaning that their confidence intervals are narrower. So you can see for adjuvant, the confidence interval is quite wide. It is 0.64 to 1. This is the meaning of the size of the diamond. And here you can see that the diamond is really short. That is for concomitant. And you can see that the confidence interval was also not that much. So if you look at the overall summary effect, the individual studies also prefer the individual blank diamonds are also on the left side of the line of no difference, signifying that chemotherapy is better. The cumulative summary effect, which is the black diamond, is also on the left side, and the hazard ratio is 0.75. So chemotherapy, again, in any way that you administer the chemotherapy, the patient has benefit. The I-squared statistic was only 12%, meaning that there was not much heterogeneity, and the test for heterogeneity also was not significant, meaning it's not heterogeneous. And the p-value was 0.041. So it was statistically significant. Now, the problem with this is you only are looking at the overall benefit. If you look at the diamond at the end of the forest plot, you're only looking at, in this paper at least, you're only looking at the cumulative effects of the treatment overall. But you have to look at the individual types also. So for induction, there is no difference, almost no difference between giving induction chemotherapy or giving radiation alone to the patient. Giving adjuvant, there is a slight benefit. If you give concomitant, there is more benefit. If you give concomitant plus adjuvant, there is even more benefit because lower the value, lower the hazard, lower the risk of the event. In this case, overall survival is death. So you should always remember when they are looking in this paper at least, normally you won't see different types. You only see one group shown to you. But in this paper, I wanted to show you that you can still include all of the individual forest plots into a big forest plot, into a cumulative forest plot, and show the individual effects of all of the studies. Now, this was for the overall survival and for the progression-free survival. The other thing meta-analysis will show you is that whether there's an absolute difference for survival between, so this paper looked at, I said, the timing between the different types of chemotherapy. So the other thing a meta-analysis will show us is that whether there's an absolute benefit of your treatment at 5 years, 2 years, or 5 years. In this paper, they have selected 5 years as their cutoff, 5 and 10 years as their cutoff. The blue line is the experimental line, and the red dot is the control dot. So experimental in the first one is induction, experimental in the second one is adjuvant, experimental in the third one in C is concomitant, and the experimental in the picture, the graph D, is adjuvant and concomitant. Now, visually looking at this, it is very clear that as you move from induction to adjuvant to concomitant with radiation, the absolute difference keeps increasing at 5 years. So this x-axis is the years, y-axis is the percentage of patients that have survived. So here you see there is no difference. With adjuvant, there is 3.3% difference at 5 years. It's 5.3% at 5 years for concomitant, and it's 12.4% at 5 years for concomitant plus adjuvant chemotherapy. And you can also follow that up by looking at the number of deaths by number of person years given here for the different arms. But looking at the picture, you should be able to look at the picture and decide that this was the difference in the overall survival comparing the 4 types of treatment. Now, the same thing for progression-free survival. So again, the blue square is the experimental arm and the control arm. And as you can see, between the induction and adjuvant, there wasn't much difference for progression-free survival. But when you went to concomitant, it was slightly better. Even though here at induction, it showed that this was better at 5 years. Here, it is only 6.6%. But if you look at concomitant plus adjuvant, progression-free survival gives an absolute, there is an absolute benefit of 12.4% at 5 years. So in this overall survival, there was a gradual increase to the concomitant plus adjuvant. Here, the concomitant wasn't that much. It was almost comparable to the others, but concomitant plus adjuvant gave an absolute difference of about 12.4% at 5 years. So you have the forest plot giving you the hazard ratios, giving you the weights of the individual studies, giving you the tests of interaction, which is the p-value, and also talking about the heterogeneity, and also making us understand why they used a fixed effects model rather than a random effects model. Then they've gone on to show that there are different timings of chemotherapy and its effect on overall survival in absolute numbers. And from the forest plot, you don't not only have the cumulative effect, you also have the individual timing effects. So with these 4 pictures itself, with these 4 figures itself, you should be able to understand the crux of the whole paper. And they added one more table just to highlight the differences, because not all the concomitant group patients had cisplatin. Some of them had carboplatin or oxaliplatin, and some of them had non-platin. So they had tried to show the differences between patients who received concomitant versus patients who received concomitant with adjuvant, because these were the 2 significant arms. So they tried to do a subgroup analysis. In the paper, you can see that. But before that, they wanted to show you the differences between the 2 groups. Now, I mentioned to you, unfortunately, that the paper has a lot of numerical values in text which are not given in the pictures. But Most of them is in the appendix. But the important lines that you have to remember is that, as I mentioned to you, the addition of chemotherapy to radiotherapy improved the overall survival. The hazard was 0.79, and for progression-free survival, the hazard was 0.75, and this was what we saw in these two. So this was 0.75 for progression-free survival, and it was 0.79 for overall survival. That is mentioned here. And then subset analysis showed that trials investigating concomitant chemotherapy or concomitant plus adjuvant were the only subsets to show a significant improvement in both overall survival and progression-free survival. That is not, shown explicitly. Only the survival curves are shown to you. So we saw the survival curves for the different timings with the absolute benefit at 5 years. So we saw all that. Now, this was not a very relevant picture because it was it is a diagram to show survival, that is overall survival, progression-free survival in trials investigating concomitant chemotherapy without the addition of induction or adjuvant. So that really didn't bother us too much. The other important picture in this paper was, if you try to add chemotherapy to any regimen, you're always worried about the long-term toxicity. We know that acute toxicity is common in more aggressive chemotherapy regimens, but what's more important is non-cancer deaths. So you can have treatment-related morbidity, which is not because of the cancer. Patients don't die of nasopharyngeal cancer, but might have non-cancer related death. So here again, you can see that they have shown that there was no essential difference between the experimental arm and the control arm for non-cancer deaths. So this is what this picture also shows. So whenever you're studying a paper on chemotherapy, the addition of more aggressive chemotherapy regimens, you not only look at the endpoints, that is your overall survival, your progression-free survival. If it is for undissectable patients, it's mostly progression-free survival. If it's for larynx, it's laryngectomy-free survival. But you also have to see whether the patients have been having unexpected death in the experimental arm compared to the control or the gold standard treatment arm. So this paper showed that there was no risk of death from the addition of chemotherapy. So that's the line here. Chemotherapy was not associated with an increase in cancer mortality because the p-value was not significant. Even though hazard ratio was slightly higher, the p-value was not significant. And so it did not matter whether you gave them additional chemotherapy or not. So the reason, if you go through this paper, there's a lot of other data that is mentioned to you. The other important thing that they looked at is, this is a summary. What we saw in the overall survival and progression-free survival, we already saw in the two forest plots that we had seen, that is figure 1 and figure 2. These two were not mentioned, so this is only in the table here. Cancer deaths we saw in the last cancer, and non-cancer deaths we saw in the last picture there. So you can see that the non-cancer deaths was not significant, but the overall test for overall survival, progression-free survival, local control, regional control, distant control, and preventing cancer deaths, everything was significant for the overall tests. And so this is just a summary of all the results that have been shown in the previous text. So the other thing that this paper had shown, that there was a slightly higher rate of acute toxicity compared to late toxicity. So you can see that the acute toxicity p-values are significant for some of them. So they show that the experimental arm had slightly higher incidence of toxicity than the standard arm. So this paper was not meant to be discussed with every line or every word that they have written. This was mostly to show you how to interpret a forest plot and to interpret survival curves. I originally planned this talk only for 30 minutes, but we're almost at 1 hour now. So if anybody has any questions, I'll take them now. but I hope that I've been able to give you a basic idea of what a meta-analysis means and what are the different aspects that you have to look at in a meta-analysis and a forest plot. I'm happy to take questions now. Bhargav, you're here?
Yes.
So I just want to show all the readers one very important paper to read. Would you all of you like to see see a very good paper on how to read a meta-analysis? It is from a very unlikely source, but it's a very good paper, basically, for understanding a meta-analysis. Should I show you that paper? It's a free download, actually. It's one of the first papers that I read. One of the first papers that I read to understand a meta-analysis. So this was written by not by a medical person. This was actually written by a non-medical person, and it was published in the Journal of Orthopedics and Sports Physical Therapy. So it is actually a very good. Are you seeing the paper, or you're not seeing the paper?
Sir, we're not seeing. We're not able to see the paper. Hello, sir. Hello.
Let me know.
Yeah, we are able to see it now.
Now,
Hello, sir.
can you see the paper now?
Yes, sir. Now we are able to see, sir.
So this is just a clinical commentary written by physiotherapist and I think a nurse. It was published in the Journal of Orthopedic and Sports Physical Therapy. So this has given quite a decent idea. Some of the pictures I've taken from here. So you go back and read this, and also read the Center of Evidence-Based Medicine, Oxford. They have a website specifically for understanding a forest plot. So if you're able to read these two articles, this is a free article, and this article is very useful in this sports medicine article is very useful. And also look at the CEBM, that is the Oxford Center of Evidence-Based Medicine, Oxford. They have a very good website on understanding meta-analysis and forest plots. So the reason why I didn't send this paper before to you was I used this paper as sort of baseline for what I was going to speak within an hour. So you're free to download this article, or I can put up this article in the group. Would you like me to do that, Bhargav?
Yes, sir.
So we can put up this article,
Yes, sir.
and we also can give the link to the Center of Evidence-Based Medicine, Oxford's website, so that whatever I've said now, if you can go back and reread it and look at this example and other meta-analysis, you'll be able to read and understand that better. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Anyone?
Sir, there are 3 questions, sir.
Yeah.
First one from Dr. Dhruv Kapoor. He is asking what exactly do you mean by heterogeneity? In what manner? The study are heterogeneous in what manner?
So not all studies will have the same age or gender distribution. They might have a very wide effect. That is, their effect might have a very wide confidence interval. So if you'll have 100% 100% females, and everybody will be 25 years of age. So when there are discrepancies between the studies, it can be either discrepancy in the study participants or it can be discrepancy in the effect. That is the size of the result that we are seeing. So that is what heterogeneity is.
Okay, thank you. Sir, there are 2 more questions which are almost on the same topic. Can you elaborate on test of interaction and how to interpret its significance?
So the test of interaction and interpretation of significance, we will do it when we are doing multivariate analysis. So for that class, we have to do practical examples from next week onwards, from the next class onwards. This was only about data meta-analysis, but what is the test of interaction and how are the tests of interaction different for different models? We will discuss when we're analyzing data, because that will be easier then. With the practical example, when we discuss, it will be easier.
Okay. Sir, any word on residual heterogeneity in the forest plot?
No, just don't read about that now. They just write it for completion's sake, I think.
Okay, sir.
Something significant which is going to change our interpretation of the study.
Okay, sir. So, sir, I think those are the questions as of now, sir. So, any word or anything you want to do for preparation for the next class, sir?
Yeah, so I'm just truncating that our data sheet to make it our original Amrita data sheet is 600, 700 something. That will be too much to analyze. So I'm trying to make that Excel and spaces sheet slightly smaller to 100 cases or 150 cases. And then what I'll do is in the next 2 days, I'll send you the list of classes that we're going to do. So there are different types of analysis that we need to do, like analysis of mean, analysis of variance, then analysis of like tests of interaction that you talked about, then univariate analysis, multivariate analysis, then Cox proportional and log rank test. So there are different headings for different classes. So we will do that from 2 weeks from now. So every 2 weeks, go through one topic with the data sheet.
Okay.
Harsh just asked whether we're doing it on SPSS or R. For the benefit of everybody here, we will do it on SPSS first. And then if we have time in the end of this course, we'll have another set of same tests running with, because even though R is open source, you have to know which R packages you have to download and all that, because the standard R and R Studio don't have all the packages that you need to run all the tests. So we will go through the R and the packages in R that we normally need for our routine analysis after we do the SPSS. Is that okay, Harsh?
Yes, sir. He's saying okay. And
Yes, sir. Yes, absolutely, sir. Absolutely. Thanks.
Does everyone have SPSS? It's an important question.
I think if anyone can unmute yourself and you can speak up, whoever want to speak, or you can put out the message in the box, chat box.
I don't know
I
how.
think some people don't have.
There are SPSS. I mean, I have the Mac version, just 22 or something like that. The problem is the spaces 18 and all that is available on the internet for download, but it requires a complicated install, and the survival package is not installed by default because SPSS is basically meant for psychology, not for cancer statistics. So we'll work something out. You just give me a day. We'll try to make sure that everybody has access to SPSS. We'll do something. Yeah, Dhruv, you can download it, but it deactivates after a specific amount of time. I think that's how it is because I stopped using SPSS for a long time, but I think the free version doesn't last completely. And I'll work something out with Bhargav and let all of you know. Is that okay?
Sure, sir. I think if we have a crack version or something, I'll search for it. If we have it, I'll put it up in our groups. The links for download with the crack.
Older versions
So,
that SPSS 18 and all is available. It's a slightly complicated crack process for Windows, but I don't think we should be advocating like that if this is recorded and being shown everywhere. So we'll work out a way. We'll try to figure out something. Or if space is a problem, let us see whether we can just do it on R and let everybody download R anyway. So just then I'll have to change some things. Just give me 2 days. What is best? Because going to R straight away is difficult. I mean, best is to learn SPSS first and then move on to R after that.
okay.
So just give me 2 days. We'll work out something for everybody.
Sure.
Yeah. So I hope everybody found it useful. And this was something new that you haven't really understood or explored before. So we will meet 2 weeks from now and start practical exercises. Yeah.
Sure, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, Bhargav. Thank you so much, everyone, for the opportunity. And I hope all of you learned something today. And
Thanks, sir. Thank you so much for giving us the opportunity to tell these classes. And
try to keep it very non-mathematical. Try to keep it very simple, so that it's easier to read. The reason why we put the papers is because you have to learn to read the paper before analyzing, before doing analysis ourselves. So the more papers you read, the more statistical methodology you'll understand, like how different people have used different statistical tests for a question. And then you will have to go learn about that test, how to do it on SPSS. There are hundreds of tutorials available online. So we will focus on the common tests. We will start in 2 weeks from now.
okay, sir.
Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much, sir. And I think some of the audience haven't been added in one of the group. So I request all of you to note my number, which I put in the group, 801-6300178. If you can just WhatsApp me hi in our WhatsApp, I'll add you to the group both in WhatsApp as well as Telegrams. So please kindly add yourself in the group for all the updated papers as well as the software. So with those words, I think we'll call it a day. And thank you so much for attending our webinar.
Thank you, everyone.